In 2009, a bored pair of college students had a truly bizarre idea that changed their lives forever. By 2011, that same duo, Nikhil Arora and Alejandro Velez, were diverting over 1 million pounds of used coffee away from landfills and right into their bank accounts. Over the next decade, the pair would use that coffee to make hundreds of millions of dollars. Thanks to Ground News for sponsoring this video, where we'll find out how coffee waste became president-approved mega money. Were they turning the coffee into gold? Had they discovered a miracle cure in the brown stuff? Well, grab a cup of joe and sit back, as we're about to plunge into the unbelievable story of how these guys got rich in one of the most surprising ways you'll ever hear. And heck, we'll even see how some other folks got rich turning used gum into shoes and turning literal trash into food. Strap in, because this is about to get weird. Now, to fully understand how Nikhil and Alejandro's solid gold idea made them rich, let's first take a look at the serious problem that unexpectedly paved the road to their success by generating huge demand for a solution. Every year, 1/3 of the food on planet Earth is wasted. That's a jaw-dropping 1.6 billion tons of edible food worth a staggering $1 trillion simply thrown out to rot. What's worse, if things continue as they are, research conducted by the Boston Consulting Group has estimated that by 2030, those food waste figures could soar, seeing as much as 66 tons of edible, usable food being wasted every second. Considering the fact that starvation and malnutrition are still serious issues in many parts of the world, it's easy to see the problem here. According to the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations, all that wasted food could feed a hungry populace equal to nearly 4 times the USA's population every year, if we can figure out how to be smarter about the problem. But there's a chance you'd never hear about all this, and the reason's pretty alarming. That's why I'm partnering with Ground News, an information platform that gives you every angle on every news story. I'm constantly researching, so I hugely appreciate how Ground News analyzes countless articles per topic, noting political bias and factual accuracy. Take this story. It's been reported by 107 news sources, but only 16% of those lean to the right, meaning if you only consume right-leaning news, it's likely you missed it. So don't let mass media algorithms leave you in the dark. Go to ground.news/beamazed or scan this QR code to get 40% off the unlimited access Vantage subscription, making it a very reasonable $5 per month. Now, back to our scheduled broadcast. There's another major hidden problem with throwing away so much food, a problem that could ultimately fuel the enormous success of Alejandro and Nikhil. That major dilemma is all about the absolutely astronomical resources wasted in the production of food that exists purely to be thrown away. And pal, put a cushion down because your jaw's about to hit the floor. According to the smarty pants data nerds at the Environmental Protection Agency, 5.9 trillion gallons of water, 778 million pounds of pesticides, 14 billion pounds of fertilizer, 170 million tons of greenhouse gases, a behemoth 140 million acres of land constituting an area the size of California and New York combined, and enough energy to power more than 50 million American homes per year, are all used, or should I say wasted, to grow and transport this food, all of which goes directly into the trash. And that doesn't include the countless hours that humans like you and me spend making it all happen. It doesn't end there, though. No. Once wasted food reaches landfill, it starts to rot and release methane, with food waste, shockingly, leading to 8 to 10% of humanity's greenhouse gas emissions. So, I think you're starting to get the picture, right? Much like a meatball that's fallen off our plate and rolled under the sofa, food waste has been ignored for a long time. But it's in these very circumstances that our grand, unexpected money-making scheme begins to take shape. Let me ask you this. Have you ever heard of something called upcycling? It's a trendy word that gets a lot of lip service among eco-lovers and hipsters alike these days. But our pals, Nikhil Arora and Alejandro Velez, started upcycling food before it was cool, way back in the long-forgotten year of 2009. And it was the most lucrative decision they ever made. So, what is upcycling? First, don't worry, it's not recycling. No one is reusing used food. We're not baby birds. Upcycling is when you repurpose edible food that would otherwise end up in a hole somewhere. So, like weird-shaped vegetables that some supermarkets don't want, or the pulp matter left over after a juice company has squeezed their fruit and veggies dry. Products like this can be taken by an upcycling company and used to make other perfectly safe-to-consume products, like oils or chips. But hold on a second there, partner. What does any of this upcycling food nonsense have to do with making buttloads of dollar bills? Great question, kiddo. Just sit back and I'll tell ya. California-born Nikhil Arora and Colombian-born Alejandro Velez were sitting in a business ethics class at the University of California, Berkeley, struggling to pay attention. Both already had job offers in investment banking and consulting, so they were pretty much set to go on and make some green in the big wide world. They didn't know each other at the time, but a single fact mentioned by their professor in that class would bring them together, change their lives, and lead to them making millions. That little factoid? Simply the idea that it's possible to grow gourmet mushrooms out of spent coffee grounds. Now, most people would have heard that fact and thought it was cool and moved on, but not these guys. Out of the 100 people in that class, they were the only two who approached their professor with a hunger to find out more about the concept and the waste-to-wages business model it more broadly suggested. Their professor encouraged them to team up to find out more about the enormous untapped potential lying dormant inside French presses and espresso machines the world over. Now, the idea of using waste coffee to grow other useful stuff is likely almost as old as coffee drinking itself. The earliest literary reference I can find, however, dates back to the mid-19th century. A short article from an 1861 copy of the Alexandria Gazette, a Virginia-based newspaper that ran from 1834 to 1974, references how it's already widely known that coffee grounds make great fertilizer. Another early reference dates from 7 years earlier, in an early November issue of the 1868 weekly magazine called Once a Week. The piece tells of a group of nuns who lived in a Naples convent. Every day after eating, they would throw used coffee grounds into a shady corner of their garden. After some time, they noticed mushrooms growing from the coffee, specifically the Agaricus neapolitanus. Surprisingly, the mushrooms were found to be so delicious once cooked that, in many parts of Italy, it became a bit of a trend to collect used coffee grounds in a flower pot and then harvest the mushrooms every 6 months. Or at least it was a trend in 1868 when this was first published. The Italians I've asked about this seem to have no clue. Whatever my Italian friends have to say, it's clear that people have known about how coffee grounds are full of natural magic for quite some time. Of course, in reality, it's not magic, but a cup full of science. Coffee grounds are full of all the good stuff plants and fungi need. Antioxidants, potassium, phosphorus, and nitrogen come together to make coffee grounds an outrageously energetic fertilizer. But what makes coffee grounds so well suited for mushroom growth in particular is that coffee grounds don't need to be added to soil as fertilizer to grow mushrooms. Mushrooms actually don't need soil to grow, and so can grow directly from the coffee grounds themselves, making for one killer team. The grounds merely have to be inoculated by adding a pre-established living fungal culture, also known as mycelium, which is the root-like system that forms the core of any fungus. In a mere matter of days, the mycelium will grow throughout the coffee grounds or other suitable substrate and begin developing into harvestable mushrooms. So, while the practice of growing mushrooms out of coffee has hardly been a secret, historically, very few folks ever connected the dots and saw the true potential for just how many dollar bills could be made. I mean, just imagine if modern farmers started using coffee on an industrial scale. Not only would they get barely any sleep, but by dumping a load of spent coffee on their fields, they could achieve the growth boost of industrial chemical fertilizers in a much cheaper and more environmentally friendly manner, while utilizing a widely available waste resource. That's where we get back to 2009. Nikhil and Alejandro decided to put the idea of upcycling coffee to the test. They took over their fraternity kitchen and started running mushroom growing experiments. They needed to know if it was actually possible to grow delicious mushrooms repeatably from old coffee. After 9 failed experiments, they finally produced a batch of oyster mushrooms so beautiful they'd make Mario proud. Now, it's one thing to grow a mushroom, it's another trying to sell one. They needed someone with the right gills to give their stamp of approval. They approached one of the 2 head chefs at Berkeley's Chez Panisse, the best restaurant in town. After what was quite literally a trial by fire, sautéing, and eating one, the master chef enthusiastically endorsed their idea. The mushrooms were delicious. A short while later, after word of their successful investigations began to spread, the students received a $5,000 grant from the Berkeley chancellor and turned down their previous job offers, choosing to become full-time urban mushroom farmers. And so their company, Back to the Roots, was born. Within 6 months, they sold 3 pounds of mushrooms to Berkeley Whole Foods, and by 2011, they were upcycling over 1 million pounds of coffee a year. By the end of 2012, that number had increased to 3,600,000 pounds of coffee, and they were selling 500 pounds of oyster mushrooms every week to customers all across Northern California. That's about 3 beer kegs full of oyster mushrooms, by the way, just to put things back into college student terms. If you're not into mushrooms and don't know how much these things cost, at 2024's prices, a 5-pound carton of oyster mushrooms is about $30. So 500 pounds comes to $3,000 a week or $156,000 a year. And given that by this time, Back to the Roots' business had diversified to selling a wide range of other sustainable products too, it's clear their venture was going amazingly well. Not bad for 2 college grads, eh? Given that 60 million tons of coffee grounds are trashed every year, equal in weight to 10 of the Great Pyramid of Giza, they had plenty of raw material to expand with. I guess you could say the world was their oyster mushroom. And it turned out, people loved the idea of growing mushrooms from upcycled coffee. So the duo started selling mushroom grow kits of inoculated substrates, biting off a slice of the gardening consumables market, a market expected to grow to $22 billion by 2030. In 2012, they'd made such a splash that they were invited to the White House in recognition of their innovative success story. Within a few more years, they had stopped farming and selling fully grown mushrooms altogether, finding their inoculated coffee ground grow kits to be much more profitable. It was certainly the right call. Between 2019 and 2020, they saw a 300% growth in sales revenue and closed the 2023 gardening season by earning the title of America's fastest-growing organic gardening brand, not leaving much room for the competition. According to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, Back to the Roots was expected to turn over more than $100 million in 2023. Well, unfortunately, their official earnings are private, so we can't confirm these figures as of 2024. What we can confirm is how much they're raking in from their investors. According to records from the United States Securities and Exchange Commission in 2022, Back to the Roots secured $18 million worth of investment in venture capital funding. A year before, in 2021, they raised $15 million. And as of 2024, they've raised a total of almost $37 million total from investors since their inception in 2009. So while their exact turnover isn't public record, if they've drawn in nearly $40 million from investors, they're clearly doing something right. And it's pretty clear there's a market for those who want to help reduce the world's extreme food waste issue with upcycled goods. As Nikhil said himself, none of this funding would be there if we weren't seeing the consumers demanding this and pulling it from the shelves. Similarly, none of our videos could be made if it wasn't thanks to you guys watching and subscribing. So, if you're not subscribed already, give that button a click and get ready to be amazed each time you open YouTube. Let's keep growing our little mycelium network of infotainment enthusiasts. And if you're already subscribed, hey, you're insanely awesome. Now, back to it. Today, Nikhil and Alejandro have witnessed their company grow into something beyond their wildest imagination. Aside from the monetary success, they've also donated tons of grow kits for educational purposes to elementary schools, expanded their product line to include organic seeds, gardening kits, and live plants, partnered with Fortnite, and upcycled millions of pounds worth of coffee. Interestingly enough, they don't actually use upcycled coffee as their primary substrate source anymore, and typically use another, equally widely available waste resource, sawdust, for their mushroom kit substrates nowadays. It's still undoubtedly a fantastic usage of industrial waste products, and the commitment of back to the roots to sustainability and upcycling looks like it has also inspired other companies to follow suit. Recently, German supermarket giant and one of the leading food retailers in Europe, Lidl, has partnered with a revolutionary egg farm that upcycles. Kipster Egg Farms, otherwise known as the farm that gives a cluck, operate out of the Netherlands and the United States. Their chickens are fed using byproducts from crop and food processing, like faulty pasta or unwanted pastries and bread. This partnership, utilizing pre-existing wasted foodstuff, will reportedly result in Lidl cutting their chicken feed carbon footprint by up to 60% if fully rolled out across their network, being much more eco-friendly than growing new grain specifically to feed chickens with. But while the chickens are living it up eating pasta and pastries, us humans are going in the other direction and are starting to eat trash. This peculiar fact is all thanks to a chip brand by the name of Trashy. This American company turns old and unwanted vegetable scraps into new fiber-rich, gluten-free vegan chips. The vegetable ingredients start their life at various Los Angeles juice companies. From these spots, tens of thousands of pounds of pressed waste vegetable pulp is collected post-juicing each time Trashy's collection teams visit. Then they magically turn it into chips. Well, probably not using magic, but they haven't revealed their exact process. Most likely, the process involves pressing the pulp into flat sheets, cutting it into suitable sized pieces, dehydrating or baking the pieces, and adding flavoring. What they don't keep a secret, though, is that they save 38 gallons of water going to waste per pound of pulp, which would usually be simply discarded. Better yet, anything Trashy doesn't end up using goes on to become animal feed. From 2020 to February 2024, they saved over 170,000 pounds of vegetables from going to waste. It's a good start, but we'll still need a lot more to make up for the 1.6 billion tons of food waste each year. So when it comes to wide-scale upcycling, it's all about thinking outside the box. And that's exactly what this next company did. This is the Gum Shoe, a new type of sneaker made from, that's right, chewing gum. The sneakers are made from GumTech, a compound known as thermoplastic elastomer. That's 20 to 30% chewing gum mixed with other plastic rubber compounds that can be melted down and shaped into usable forms. Gumdrop, the company that makes them, sneaks around the aesthetic streets of Amsterdam, scraping up all the discarded gum they can find, which is a lot. Every year, a huge 3.3 million pounds of gum are dropped on the streets there. And for every 2.2 pounds of gum they collect, 4 pairs of sneakers can be made. Recently, they partnered with Adidas to make 5 new styles of GumTech shoes. They've also expanded into making coffee mugs and their own gumdrop trash cans, each made of 166 pieces of gum. The trash can is for gum only, gum which can be used to make more gum trash cans. Then, once the gumdrop trash cans reach the end of their life cycle, they're recycled to make even more gumdrop trash cans. And so goes the cycle of gum life. While this sounds like it's great for the planet, it's also good for the Benjamins. Gumdrop claims these bins collectively save their clients $1.25 million a year on cleaning bills. I'm not sure about you, but those clients must have one hell of a gum problem. If Gumdrop keeps innovating at this rate, we're not going to be asking if objects are secretly made of cake anymore, but if they're made of chewing gum. Alright, is this phone real? Or is it chewing gum? Yeah, it's chewing gum. So by now it's pretty clear. There's money to be made in finding a purpose for seemingly useless waste products. So much so, the food upcycling market is expected to reach $97 billion by 2031. And while we've seen some fascinating stuff so far, what we haven't seen might be the most mind-blowing and widely useful food innovation ever, because it turns out waste food can be used to make energy. The waste-to-energy model uses anaerobic digestion, or AD for short. This amazing technology converts agricultural waste into usable energy. The system works by collecting plant and animal materials, like waste foods, feed, manure, and other organic farm stuff, and locking them inside a sealed tank, or, to use the technical term, a digester. Once sealed inside the airless container, anaerobic means airless, by the way, the material begins to rot, thanks to specialized bacteria and fungus. As it does, it releases gas, which can then be used as fuel to generate electricity and heat. As farmers increasingly use electric-powered tools and vehicles, the production of biogas on site means they could in theory power the whole farm, including their tools and vehicles, on their own waste products, allowing farms to drastically reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. A byproduct of these systems is what the fancy schmancy science people call digestate. Once all the organic material inside the digester has rotted away, what's left is a nutrient-rich fertilizer, ready to make its way back to the crop fields. Scientists are even finding alternative uses for this digestate. For example, a blend of digestate oil, biodiesel, and alcohol has been found viable as fuel for cars. The studies are looking pretty promising too, so who knows, maybe we'll be upcycling food right into our gas tanks in the near future. Right now, an AD system costs between $625,000 and $6,250,000 depending on the size of the farm. So while they're not cheap, their potential is huge. The idea isn't actually anything new. The United Kingdom has been using anaerobic digestion systems since the 19th century. In 1895, the idea to divert biogas from the sewers to fuel the gas street lamps was introduced. Biogas is still used in the UK today, and while it doesn't fuel their street lamps, currently, 500 AD systems collectively generate 3% of the country's total renewable energy. Unfortunately, the current downside is that these systems can be costly to set up compared to just buying other types of fuel, and can take a lot of work to maintain, and they're fairly inefficient. But here's hoping for a future fueled by farm waste and these magical fart collection chambers. But hey, what about us normal folks who don't have access to industrial machinery, who might still want to upcycle food waste to save money and earn cash? Well, don't worry, I got you. Upcycling used tea, of all things, is a great way to give your plants a new lease on life. More significantly, make a healthy profit. Since tea leaves are full of nitrogen, they make ideal fertilizers. Plus, since tea is very popular, there's an abundance of cafes throwing out spent leaves. This means there's a huge opportunity to capitalize on this waste product, something which China-based company Chazens is already doing. Chazens upcycles waste tea leaves into, get this, plastic, or at least tea fiber plastic, a patent-pending material that can be used for products ranging from tableware and cups to bags. The ingenious approach involves breaking down dehydrated leftover tea leaves into powder before mixing them with tea oil and plant-based plastics. The result is a surprisingly versatile material that actually retains some of the tea leaves' natural fragrance and color. But if tea isn't your thing, then how about bananas? Banana peels are a great product to upcycle. They're full of potassium, fiber, protein, vitamin B6, vitamin B12, and magnesium. All the good stuff plants love. If you dry a peel and grind it up, you can sprinkle it on plants as fertilizer. Alternatively, if you wrap a peel around the base of a tomato plant, it likewise helps the plant grow, and presumably will cause the tomato plant to slip over comically in the unlikely and disturbing incident it gains the ability to walk. Amazingly, you can also use blended up banana peels with a dash of water as ultra-cheap polish paste for shoes and tarnished silver alike, as the natural oils and gentle abrasive properties act in a somewhat similar way to regular polish products. There's actually already a pretty successful company that upcycles bananas called Barnana, who've built a multi-million-dollar business from taking bananas deemed too imperfect for consumers and turning them into healthy, dehydrated banana snacks. As we've seen, countless startups are doing their best to tackle food waste, and governments are also starting to move in a similar direction. In 2015, the US government introduced an ambitious goal to reduce food waste by 50% by 2030, with schemes to invest in tech innovations, education, and recycling. Meanwhile, countries like South Korea banned food waste outright way back in 2005. Now, South Koreans pay a small food waste tax for anything they don't use. The tax is roughly 6 cents per 2 pounds of waste, so it's not a lot. It did, however, lead to a welcome 20% reduction in home food waste, a 5% reduction in groceries bought, and that has saved the average household $172 a year. And while there's no doubt we've got a long way to go as a species to tackle all the food waste on Earth, what's becoming increasingly clear is that not only are there obvious environmental benefits to doing so, but there's actually real money to be made. All it takes is the outside-the-box thinking of clever individuals like Nikhil Arora and Alejandro Velez taking stuff that's going to waste anyway and finding ingenious ways to utilize it. Now go, my pretties, get out there and save the world and get filthy rich doing it. But before you go down to ground.news/beamazed to get 40% off the Ground News Vantage subscription. What waste product can you think of that could be upcycled? Let me know down in the comments, and who knows, you might inspire someone to go and make $100 million. See you in the next one.